let's say it's not really about billionaires. It's about acceptance
Yeah, and the validation and
and validation.
Yeah.
And I wish look, in part, I'm looking for confidence, right? The confidence of the community. And we talked about the toxicity.
Oh, they're confident.
Oh, no, they're not.
I mean, you could wheel some maximalists out here that would give you a line that there'd be zero doubt.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about absolutism, right? Totalizing behavior is one of the downfalls of the system. I mean, if we brought somebody out who was completely convinced of Salafist Islam, would they be confident? I mean, they might be willing to blow themselves up, to show their confidence that they had an eternal reward taking out people who are threats, to Islam. I don't know.
What do you mean by confidence then?
Yeah, I don't think I know the difference between confidence and conviction.
Well, confidence. I think at some point you're looking for a quieter, kind of more deliberative phase of this project. Like the initial phase is
initial phase is survival.
Well, yes, you say I'm worried about my family. I'm worried about the UK, right? So the first thing we saw was you're worried about you, and you're worried about your family, which is you extended. Mm-hmm. Then we were worried about UK, which is your country,
and my friends. Put them
and your friend. Okay, so friends next country. So these are sort of circles of empathy, and they're radiating out, and eventually, you care about all of your fellow men. There comes to be a point where you're not worried about the Bitcoin. You're not worried about your own personal finances. You're not worried about whether you're right or you're wrong. You've already given yourself your pats on your back. And you start thinking, okay, well, what is this meant to do? What should we be doing? And in part, it's going to be a self-organizing system. And one of the things that we're going to find out is, did this select for people who are able to form institutions themselves? Or are these people who hate institutions so much, we're not going to do that? That's what boomers did, man. Okay, so now, if you form institutions, what will the nature of those institutions be? One possibility, you see, is that Silicon Valley was not good at forming new institutions because it was so good at taking apart old ones. So, the concept of software eating the world meant, why should I create anything in the world if software is just going to eat it later? So the only thing worth doing is doing lightweight software things, because everything that's brick and mortar is going to get blown away. Well, in a certain sense, it may be, here's a good reason why Bitcoin should fail. Bitcoiners, being decentralized, are going to build decentralized things. And those decentralized things will be very good at removing corrupt things that are centralized. And it will be very bad at actually creating the new framework that we need when centralization is necessary. Yeah. Now, that I don't know. That's a story, right? It's not necessarily a true story. Maybe the Bitcoiners are exceptionally good at doing centralized things when centralization is called for. I don't know.
Well, we're talking in absolutes again. That's the thing about Bitcoin, is there's a range. There is an absolute range. There are those that want complete breakdown of the state and believe in anarchism, which I don't. I don't think it's not whether I theoretically believe it, and I just don't believe it can happen, because humans want to organize.
You and I have talked about
we talked about this, and we had that conversation because I found, oh God, I'm going to get so much hate for saying this, but I found your conversation with Brett about the monopoly on violence really interesting, because I was trying to weigh up the net of both scenarios, absolute freedom versus state and a monopoly on violence, and like, which is net best? And it depends where you measure it. Like, if you are a complete freedom loving anarchist, you absolutely believe that you should be free and no one should have any right to make any decision over you. Others believe that it's better that we organize and we have agree collective rules. I find that super interesting, but the spectrum is there. You have got anarchists, and you've got some quiet under the radar socialists who don't want to admit it because they don't want to get called as, and everything in between, so there are a range of people, and they want to do a range of things. But I think the common thing that brings most Bitcoiners together is they want to end what is considered the cancer of central banking. I think that is
What is the cancer of central bank?
I just think it's the ability to mess with the money, and that where you are, you've seen different impacts. Whether you're in Venezuela, which I've been to see the impact, or whether you're in Lebanon, it's different, or whether you're in Turkey, it's different levels of inflation that's affected it. But I think generally speaking, there is that common understanding, a common agreement that the money printer is too easy to turn on now. There is no check on the power of the money printer. And if we can end that or rein that in, that's going to be better for society.
And what if you had an MMT person across from you?
I've done it. I did it with Stephanie Kelton. I enjoyed having the conversation. I think she's full of shit, but I enjoyed having the conversation.
Okay, but let me just stand in for since she's not here. Right? So the idea is, no, you don't understand. This is great. We have a problem if we can't print our way out of our own debt. You have to appreciate that this is a feature, not a bug, and that in effect, part of the problem is that if you actually introduce the kind of money that you want to introduce, you're going to be condemning society to cyclical tragedy. That effectively, without central banking and various illusions involving money, we have no way of dampening this cycle, and it's just going to be a cycle of monetary and financial violence that is revisited upon everyone at times of the market's choosing, and not when we can afford it.
Well, if you can't print money, you can't go to war in most cases. And when you look at the collapse of fiat currencies, the vast majority of time they happen because a country went to war and kept going to war and financing wars that it couldn't win. And in that way, trying to remove that capability over a long period of time from governments is like unequivocally a peaceful endeavor.
I've never actually always bought that argument because we've always been pretty much in a perpetual state of war somewhere on this planet.
We can get back to the nature of humanity on that, but just looking at the history of fiat currency collapses, they happen from war.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I think it's sometimes I feel it's a bit reckless to say, oh, if you fix the money, there won't be any more war.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's too,
humans. Yeah. We're going to do what we do. Although we're killing each other less than we ever have before.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So based on what you said, the Stephanie Kelton argument, let me tell you my position. So the position I hold isn't as common in Bitcoiners, or if it is, it's under the radar. I actually think there will be a symbiotic relationship with fiat currencies and Bitcoin forever. And I don't think we will lose the state. Some would disagree. My friend Robert Breedlove, big fan of the sovereign individual, he thinks this, we're on a different path because the logic of violence changes with technology. And I love the arguments, I love the theory, but I think humans organize and they want a bit of protection, want a bit of centralized protection. I think what will happen is we will have potentially some checking on the power with Bitcoin, but you will still have the money printer, but it would have to be used in a more responsible way. So for example, go back to pre-71. I'm not a huge expert on the gold standard, okay? But there was a check on the money, but it didn't stop government being able to have the ability to print money. And I think that symbiotic relationship is needed. I still think you need some form of way of organizing society. Because if you have the big, I spoke to Scott Horton. He was like, you don't want to have the big red button to get rid of government, even though he's a libertarian. He said it'll be chaos. Mm-hmm. But what you can do is, let's say, target making it just a bit smaller. It was Eric Voorhees who told me that, 1% or 5% smaller. And let's just try and check because it's got out of hand now. So if Bitcoin can reduce government by 1% next year, I would call that a huge success. Huge success.
Yeah. I don't know where, I think you and I are in different places.
Well, I expected that.
Yeah. I think I'm worried about general collapse at a level that you're not.
Oh, no, I am.
Okay.
No, I am. But different types of collapse.
Societal collapse?
Yeah. Beyond. I'm worried right now that what we have is we have a technically demanding planet. Mm-hmm. Leadership, peacetime leadership that is completely mismatched with the challenges that we actually face. A potential energy function for violence that is confusing everyone from Steven Pinker on down. because, this idea that in general things are as peaceful or more peaceful than they've ever been. And it's just like, wow, this forest hasn't burned for 75 years. Well, what do you think is going to happen when it does burn for the first time in 75 years? It's going to be pretty exciting. So right now, what I think is that we're in a terribly dangerous situation that isn't obviously dangerous. And I'm much more concerned, I think, than you guys are.
No, I definitely. Do you think we're in a fourth turning?
Can I be straight?
Yeah.
I hate this stuff.
Why?
Well, because I've been talking recently about this as snap to grid intellectualism, right?
We had this conversation.
And snap to grid intellectualism is like, you said something that reminds me of something I heard. And then somebody will repeat something like, strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong men. It always is a cycle, right? And then you just think, okay, well, that has some kind of naive hold on my mind, but let me break that for a second. Since 1952, we've had thermonuclear weapons. So don't talk to me about the fourth turning. Like, we can't afford for weak men to make hard times and know that this thing goes on forever.
Yeah.
Things changed. Huge, enormous change occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And so my concern is I'm here to have a different conversation. I don't want to have I don't want to have a Milton Friedman conversation. I don't want to have a Hayekian conversation. I don't want to have an Ayn Rand conversation. I don't want to have an MMT conversation. You guys are something new. I'm here to have a new conversation without fourth turnings. We're in deep shit. You guys are rich. You guys are talking about a new form of money that doesn't have a country to go with it. It's not a chemical element, right? What is the biggest, most beautiful future that you imagine for your families? Like, mine begins with survival.
It's a life raft right now.
I believe me, I hear that.
Yeah,
but like, what are we going to disintermediate? Who are we going to disintermediate? What are we doing?